and your radios. It's time for the Car Man Show. It's about that time. Yeah, you know. Get ready for the Car Man Show. Turn on your TVs and your radios. It's time for the Car Man Show. Tired of riding that old car, spending all that cash on breakdown and repairs, burning all that gas. Paying on time, but car got you late. Need a newer car with a lower interest rate. Public transportation, giving you the blues. Call the car man, he'll know what to do. Don't waste no more time, cause now you know, pick up the phone. It's the Car Man Show. Who can? You can. Who can? You can. I can. You can. With who? Car Man. Who can? You can. Who can? You can. I can. You can. With who? Car Man. Who can? You can. Who can? You can. I can. You can. With who? Car Man. Who can? You can. Who can? You can. I can. You can. With who? Car Man.
Hello and hello and hello again, and welcome to another edition of the Car Man Show podcast. Just want to say a welcome to everybody that has downloaded this podcast or may soon to join the live podcast. Today we are doing a live podcast where people can actually ask the car man their question, their car question, and what we are doing is I'm going to try to answer as many questions as I can. I actually have some questions and some things that I want to talk about while we're here on this brief podcast. So if you've never heard of the Car Man, you're saying, who is the Car Man? The Car Man is about educating you, the automotive consumer, on the ins and outs of purchasing cars. I've been doing radio for such a long time and have always thought about trying to do something when it comes to doing a podcast. So I decided to do a podcast and just talk about some of the things that I've talked about over the years on radio stations all over the country. I've been doing radio since 1994 and basically educating people all over the country on the ins and outs of purchasing cars. There have been a lot of people out here who have taken my advice. If I had to do my quick calculation, I know when you calculate the listening audiences of all of the markets that I've been in, Chicago, Detroit, Vegas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Texas, that's well over 1 million people that have actually heard my message and taken my advice indirectly or directly with their situation. Also, people go to my website, thecarmanshow.com, to also contact me. So I want to get right into the whole coronavirus thing. This is a very difficult time that we all are living in. The reality now is that it is important for each and every one of us to have reliable transportation or just transportation, because for all of you that rely on public transportation to continue and operate at the same schedule, that may not happen. I'm not sure. I don't know anything, but you just don't know. And so it's important for you to try to make sure you cover all your bases so that in case you need a reliable car, you have a reliable car. Now, during this time, there are a lot of you that are dealing with some financial struggles, and I definitely feel for you in everything that you may be dealing with or going through. But there are ways to handle, like if you have car payments that you are struggling to pay during this time. Now, some banks are offering consumers and offering them a 60-day no payment, and it won't affect your credit. So essentially what happens is they'll delay the payments for 60 days, put those 2 payments that you don't pay on the end of the loan, and they won't allow you to allow your credit to go down. Some are saying pay what you can. They may not have a 60-day grace period, but they say pay what you can, and a lot of them are saying there's not going to be too many repos during this time. So bottom line is, whatever the type of situation that you're in, just call the finance company. I know sometimes people are afraid to contact the finance company. This is not one of those times. Call them, tell them what's going on with you, and I'm pretty sure that they will be able to help you in your situation. So the banks now, speaking of the banks out here are doing some great things. What they're doing is they've had some of the most aggressive finance options and terms that I've ever seen. 0% financing for up to 84 months on certain vehicles, no payment for 90 days, zero money down, 6-month payment forgiveness if you lose your job, and then a hefty amount of rebates on vehicle. The question is, though, when is the best time to buy a car? And in my 24 years in the car business, I've never seen a better time than now because of all the incentives. Understanding the things that are going on, but because of all of the incentives, I've never seen a better time to buy a vehicle. Now, there are a lot of you out here that are constantly wanting to just educate yourself about your car situation. And so what I'm doing today is I am going to give you the 15 things that I feel as though every car buyer should know. Now, actually, I've got a list that spans much bigger than 15, but for the sake of time, I just want to do 15 things that every car buyer should know. So if you want to get a pen, you can get a pen and write down this information, but you want to definitely know 15 things that every car buyer should know. So the first thing is that if you happen to be a person that is looking to trade your car in, let's talk about that first. Keeping your car mileage low will ensure that you get a max trade-in value when you go to the dealership. More miles on a car means less trade-in value. There's a lot of you out here that have a lot of miles on your car, and it is going to be very difficult for you to trade in your car if you have a whole lot of miles. But it's smart to trade out of your car if you have low miles. Now, what do you consider to be low miles? Any mileage under 100,000 is workable. Once a car hits 100,000 miles, then it is in a completely different category. Then you have, here's something else that's important. And this is something that it continues. I mean, since before I even got in the car business, so many people don't realize that you got to change the oil in your car. Every manufacturer has a recommendation for, how many miles you need to drive and then change your oil. You need to know what that recommendation is. It used to be 3,000. Some of the newer cars, just a little longer. But, if you have a vehicle and you don't change the oil, very quickly that vehicle is going to go down, and you need to understand that is the risk that you have. I've seen people who have engines have locked up because they didn't change the oil. Something as simple as a $30 to $40 oil change could cause you a $3,000 to $6,000 to $7,000 repair of a new engine. There are a lot of you out here that when you're talking about trading in your car, here's another thing. You're talking about trading in your car, you need to trade it in when, like I say, the mileage is under 100,000 miles. Now, after it gets to 100,000 miles, what the dealership is going to do is they're going to put it in a certain category, and a lot of times they're going to put it in the category of just being a car good enough for them to wholesale. Now, the moment that you hear that word wholesale, that means the value of what they're going to give you on a trade-in is dramatically reduced. So it's always important to keep the mileage low or trade before you get over 100,000 miles. Now, here's something else that's important that's just maybe in the last 10 years has been something that people have looked at. always get gap insurance. Now, the reason I say always get gap insurance is because gap insurance, what it does is it covers the difference. If your car is totaled and you don't have if your car is totaled and you have full coverage insurance, your insurance is only going to cover the value of the vehicle, not the cost of the amount of the loan, but the value of the vehicle. And so it's important for you to have gap insurance. Some loans require it, that the gap insurance will make it so that in the instance that you are have your car totaled, your full coverage only covers 80% of the loan. The other 20% will be covered through your gap insurance, and you will be able to turn around and get another vehicle. If you just happen to tune in, you are listening to a live podcast of the Carman Show. I've been doing radio for a long time, educating consumers all over the country on the ins and outs of purchasing cars, and we're starting off with a podcast, playing around with some ideas to see what you, the listeners, like, and we want to continue to grow and evolve into a successful podcast over the airwaves. So my website is thecarmanshow.com. That's thecarmanshow.com. Here's something else that I wanted to bring up. Repossessions. A lot of people out here have cars that have been repossessed. Now, what does it mean when you have a car that's been repossessed? What it basically means is that you didn't pay the bill. Now, the reality of it is that some banks, what they do is they will say, hey, you can just give the car back. Now, when you're talking about give the car back, when I've over the years I've asked people, I say, hey, do you have a repo? They say, no, I don't have a repo. Then we talk further and they say, well, yeah, I had to give a car back. Well, it's considered to be the same thing on your credit report. The credit report shows it as a repo, whether it's involuntary or voluntary. A repo is a repo. So always understand that there's absolutely no difference between a regular repo, where they come and get it, or you take it back to them. It's absolutely no difference. Here's something else. When you go and buy a vehicle, consumers now are so used to being able to take something back if they don't like it, if it don't fit. When you buy a car, you can't take a car back. Once you sign the contract, you are legally bound. To that vehicle. You're legally bound to that vehicle. Now, sometimes dealerships will work with you and help you maybe navigate into if it's within a reasonable period of time. And when I say a reasonable period of time, I'm talking about maybe a couple days. Not a couple days, maybe a day. Because once you drive that car off the lot, technically it's your vehicle. And so you need to make sure that once you sign that contract, you know exactly what you're doing, because there is no turning back. And no dealership anywhere is obligated to give you a refund or let you get out of that contract once you sign it. So you need to understand that. How about buying cars with less than 100,000 miles? When you're buying a car, you want to put down, when you're buying a car, you want to have your mileage down as low as you possibly can. Typically, I tell people, unless you're buying a cash car, $3,000-$4,000, I typically tell people, do not finance a car that has over 100,000 miles, because more than likely you're going to be on a 4 or 5 year contract, and before you know it, you'll have 200,000 miles on a car that's worth nothing. And so it's important to,